Are we all sitting comfortably?
Yes.
For the sake of the schedule, I know there's a few more people that might turn up, but I need to start punctually, so I'm going to start now. And thank you for turning up for this one. Question of Mysticism, my Glastonbury Abbey adventures. It's my belief that Glastonbury Abbey is interactive. I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of a very wide spectrum of humanity stories that indicate what I mean by that. And in the course of that, there is an encouragement, obviously, for you guys to form your own kind of sense of how you can potentially interact with whatever your particular local sites are or places that you come into contact with. So I'm sure we're all aware of Frederick Bligh and his remarkable psychic archaeology at the beginning of the 20th century, where through automatic writing he connects with an apparent collective intelligence in Glastonbury Abbey. It's kind of like the brain power of all the monks that have been there over 1,000 years or so. The first line that came out of this automatic writing, all knowledge is eternal, is available to mental sympathy. And further on, the thought that made the great church of Glaston was not bounded by ye mind, and that thought must live and prevail. And these ideas have permeated people's thinking about Glastonbury Abbey for the whole of the last century on the basis of that. Our Abbey was a message in ye stones. In ye foundations and ye distances be a mystery. In the design of the floor lies the future prophecy of Glastonbury, together with the inward secrets of Christianity. And a lot of what comes back out through that for us all is all this stuff about geometry. A lot of people, when they think of Bond, they think simply of that. I have a great sense of the fact that the company of Avalon, the collective intelligence, they often do come through, if you like, in Bond's work as individuals, as actual humans with human biography that you have potentially some kind of emotional connection with. Back in 2013, on Christmas Eve, I found an original 1924 copy of Company of Avalon in Courtyard Books, and I thought, I must buy this. This is so well timed. And I had a little read of it that day, and from that point on, it became my Christmas carol. It became my Ghost of Christmas Past text. And every single Christmas Eve, there's a few little passages in there I will read. And more often than not, I'll find myself in Glastonbury Abbey and you'll hear how some of that has played out. But as I say, it's the sacred geometry business. You know, John Michel, on the way to writing City of Revelation, had access to unpublished papers of Bligh during the 1960s. And he puts forward this idea that the geometry that's baked into the old church and is expanded all the way through the Middle Ages into the later buildings is inspired by the geometry of the city of the New Jerusalem in Revelation. And there are people that have really gone to town on this. There's a whole lecture on that in its own right. There's people who have disappeared up their own backsides with the numerology of how you can tease all of this stuff out. I'm not here to do that today, but a lot of people, especially in recent years, present stuff about the New Jerusalem, and people get uncomfortable, and they say, well, we don't want any more Jerusalem. Look at the state of Jerusalem. Look at everything that's gone on down through the ages. I'm going to bring a reframing of that for you in the course of this presentation. Now, if you get stuck into all this sacred geometry malarkey, sooner or later you encounter Schwaller de Lubitz, who was, it has to be said, fascist as fuck, but we'll sort of step aside from that and just look at the fact that the guy was in Karnak for 15 solid years and measured every last centimetre of it, recorded every last hieroglyph. So I respect what he's got to say about this. And in the course of this, there's some very interesting ideas. The fact that he believed that some Egyptian temples had a built-in timescale, that they will perhaps only exist for a particular archaeological period, and then they'd be kind of closed down. Now, where that took me to, and it is a wild idea that we've just thrown into the airwaves, one account of the Battle of Camlan, where Arthur is fatally wounded, says it's 539 AD. Glastonbury Abbey is brought down in 1539 AD. That's exactly 1,000 years, and it did rather make me think, a very mysterious sense of overlay here that maybe nobody is actually conscious of physically. Here's some typical weird stuff out of the work of Schwaller. Karnak temple as cosmic man, body of Osiris in the case of Egypt. Obviously a church is the body of Christ, but I just allow myself to just kind of go into this reverie where I think, well, maybe Glastonbury Abbey in its full form, you could say, is it the body of Adam Campbell, or is it even the body of Arthur? It's wild stuff. Now, it's also very interesting that it has been suggested that Schwaller was the lodestone for the material that finds itself published as Fulcanelli's Mystery of the Cathedrals. That is which came out in 1926, and as I'm sure most of you will know, is a foundation text in our understanding of being willing to believe that cathedrals are books in stone and there's a whole hermetic, alchemical load of malarkey baked into them. And if you get into Glastonbury Abbey, you know, Fulcanelli is a lot of use. We'll come back to him as well. But my little personal story starts as far back as 1996, when I was on my way to the supermarket that is now Morrison's but was Safeways. I was walking past the fence that's now kind of pretty much built up with a hedge, but you could, in those days you could look into the Abbey, see the Abbots' kitchen, see the rooms a lot more clearly. And I just looked over and in my head, not aloud, just said, yo, come to Avalon boys, what's happening? And what came back to me in the voice of my own internal monologue, not as some clairaudient voice, was Trithemius is the key. And I thought, what? You know, this is pre-internet. I knew a bit about Trithemius. I knew about, you know, steganography and so on, and the connection of John Dee. What I didn't know, and it took me a few years to find out this, is the whole idea that Trithemius came up with, that history is governed by a succession of archangels in sequences of 354 years, and he predicted ahead of time that an age of the Archangel Michael would start in 1879. And this became, in the 19th century, in the run-up to 1879, the kind of 2012 of the day. Not as widespread, but the mystics, the occultists, they were waiting on it. They were waiting on 1879. There's the alchemist of the Golden Dawn, Aton. He informed Madame Blavatsky of Trithemius's prophecies in 1878. There's a diary entry from Blavatsky saying that Aton was told all about it. So that's a bit indicative of that. And I adopted that idea. I started to think it's very interesting that the modern revival of Glastonbury, the Abbey, Guidon's work, everything has kind of happened after 1879. And I wrote my book, Alistair Crowley and the Inner Horus, and in a sense of Robert Anton Wilson meta adventures, I thought, well, let's try another reality tunnel. And my book, The Occult Battle of Britain, started off as The Fortune and the Year of Michael. You know, I wanted to see how far you could go with that. Now, during this time also, I became aware that there was a chapel dedicated to St. Michael, the Archangel Michael, in the grounds of Glastonbury Abbey. And I knew that it was somewhere in relation to the monk cemetery where the contentious bones of Arthur and Guinevere were discovered. However, I didn't know exactly where it was. There are models that have it attached to the cloister building. But back in 2018, I spoke with the Reverend Dr. Mark Hutchinson, who used to work in the Abbey, who, as well as being part of the living history team, walking around dressed like a monk, he's done like research, he's attached to Exeter University, he's gone into the archives, and he had done an updated map based on the archaeology from the Abbey. Started in the 1930s, but he upgraded it and he said, well, yeah, this is where the Archangel Michael Chapel was. Now, I didn't say, I'll put a little piggy there of exactly where it was, and it's directly next to the monk cemetery. It's pretty much opposite where the so-called Galilee feature is. And when he told me where it was, and he gave me a copy of the map, the first thing I did was a Wednesday afternoon in July 2018. I walked out to that very spot and I stood there and I just gave a yell Archangel Michael. You know, I think I might have even gone so far as to raise my hands facing the tall tower, which of course is also dedicated to Archangel Michael, and pretty much said, well, yeah, I'm here, I'm up for it, Archangel Michael. Because I thought, and this is an attitude that I take all the way through these stories, when has anyone done this? When was the last time anyone gave a very conscious yo to Archangel Michael? Well, the archaeologists would have dug around and said, oh, this must be the chapel of the Archangel Michael. But the emotional attitude that they would have had towards where they were and what was going on would not be the same. So a couple of days later, it's a Saturday, we've got the regular Church of England pilgrimage, which is quite a vibey old day in the Abbey. All this stuff is going on. I go in there anyway, but I deliberately went in there on that day, and I decided that I would stand again on that very same spot and give a yo to Archangel Michael while all this was going on there. Now, this is a much later picture, but you can see me standing in that exact location. Now, when I got there was a pop-up gazebo tent. You know, I've inserted a little pic in it to show you how adjacent it was. Now, that's sloped there. That's where the walls of the cemetery were, and I think it's quite likely that this chapel butted up against that. You can see it's adjacent. It's facing the other way. It was facing into the body of the church. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I walked over to it, and when I looked inside, on a table there's an enormous great icon of the Archangel Michael. And there's a little Bible there, and someone's got, they're not lit, there's a load of night lights, there's a little chalice. I thought, it's a portable chapel to the Archangel Michael. This guy, whoever's put this there, must know that this is where the Archangel Michael chapel was. So there was no one there. I waited around for ages. I finally saw somebody, and I said, you must have put this here deliberately, mate, mustn't you? And he said, what do you mean? He had no idea. Now, what was also startling to me was that he weren't fussed about it. Now, maybe if it had been the Catholics the next day, I would have got a better response. But as far as I was concerned, that said to me, game on, Paul. This is the right attitude to cultivate. You're onto something here. Now, a little bit later on in the year, August 2018, I was one of the catalysts which was behind the first Glastonbury William Bligh Festival. And another idea occurred to me, nobody's ever done this before. We've got this association in Glastonbury with our so-called, Glastonbury in Jerusalem. And we had this assumption that it's written about that William Blake is telling you a story that Joseph Aramithia brought the young Jesus here. And that's just kind of, nobody questions that, but if you actually study William Blake, it's really difficult to pin that one down. And Blake mentions zillions of place names in this country, particularly in the prophetic book Jerusalem, and he never mentions Glastonbury once. Not once anywhere in William Blake's work is there a single name check of Glastonbury. And yet the first bit of artwork we've got of his from when he was a teenager was a drawing of Joseph Aramithia. So I was aware that there's a lost painting on the ancient Britons, and Blake had written quite a lot about it for a catalogue of a particular event that it was displayed at. And Blake's writing on Arthur is pretty damn strange. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be intriguing, because we're already in a liminal zone with Blake and Glastonbury, if I read out Blake's words on Arthur, on the side of Arthur's grave in Glastonbury Abbey. So yeah, the giant Albion was patriarch of the Atlantic. He's the Atlas of the Greeks, one of those the Greeks called Titans. The stories of Arthur and the acts of Albion apply to a prince of the 5th century who conquered Europe and held the empire of the world in the Dark Age, which the Romans never again recovered. Now that little passage was the inspiration for Geoffrey Ashe to write his 1971 masterpiece, Camelot and the Vision of Albion, which really shows you how far you can go riffing on that very strange idea. Now there is on my YouTube channel, there's a Blake playlist where the whole thing that I did in there is all on there, my leading and the complete passage. And I've done this thing now more than once. John Constable's arranged a few Blake birthday events in the Abbey. There was another sort of little mini Blake festival in the Abbey. I've made a habit of doing this thing. I think it's kind of very interesting. So 5 years ago at this conference, I launched the Occult Battle of Britain which involved an enormous amount of mental voltage. And I said a lot about Trithemius, and I even mentioned how the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor had extended his cosmology to take in sort of enormous equinoctial cycles that are like stuff out of Blavatsky, and so on. And there was a general sense, that Steiner was part of the equation. I was writing about Glastonbury people, the Avalonians, putting them against the Ariosophists of Germany, but Steiner kept intruding, and I found at one point, although I'd written about his visit to Tangier in 1924 multiple times, that something just overrode me and wanted to give me the information about every single person that accompanied him, who they were, what was going on. I had the sense that there was an interface between Dion Fortune, particularly, and even Frederick Bligh, the Avalonians and Anthroposophy that was somehow bubbling under in the 1920s, and I expressed it as best I could at that point in that text. Christmas Eve 2020, I'm in Glastonbury Abbey. I've read a few bits out of Company of Avalon. I'm just being all nostalgic and just giving a yo to the Ghost of Christmas Past. And as I'd gone into the Abbey, I'd seen this young woman, I don't know, she could have been more than early 20s, looking all rapt and mystical and staring into space. I just clocked her, and I went up and sat on the bench in the Edgar chapel. She's still hanging about, she's hanging about by the altar, and I had this real strong urge to go and talk to her. And I thought, Paul, come on, man, you're a 60-year-old bloke. Talking to some like teenage girl in Glastonbury Abbey on Christmas Eve. I don't know about this. But something else just said, no, talk to her. So I did, and holy shit, man, that turned out to be very, very important. She was over here from Switzerland for a few months. She had been brought up in Anthroposophical big time. Her father was a pastor in a Steiner church. They've got a few eccentric ideas about Jesus, but there we are. And he was also into Anthroposophical beekeeping. He'd written a book on all of that subject. And in her youth, she'd been to the Goetheanum more than once. In her teenage years, she kind of slightly rebelled against it, but she was back on board to the extent of having a love for the Archangel Michael. So I started talking to her, and what was interesting was she didn't know about Trithemius and the cycles and the significance of Archangel Michael for Anthroposophy, because Steiner felt that Anthroposophy was a Michaelic mystery school, that it was particularly set up for this age of the Archangel Michael that kicked in 1879. She didn't know about that, so it was very weird that I was telling her that. And I also told her the old Bligh story. I told her about Dion Fortune and the Magical Battle of Britain and so on and so forth, and lent her my book. And there was a few occasions after that when we met up in there, and she did this bit of artwork for me of Archangel Michael, which I think, those of you who know Steiner artwork will see that it's got that kind of flavour about it. And there was one story that she told me in there that really did wind me right out. She was in Switzerland, but one half of her family came from Germany, and one of her grandparents, one of her granddad, had been in the hippie youth. There was no way out of it in those days. And he was now very, very old. He got Alzheimer's. He didn't know what day it was. But there was one particular memory from 1945, from the time when the Russians had entered into Germany and things were getting pretty damn bad. He had witnessed in hiding from a vantage point a whole bunch of Russian soldiers rounding up a bunch of old men and women, mothers, children, herding them into the church, setting fire to it. They'd all died screaming in there, and he was just replaying this 24/7. And I was told this story in Glastonbury Abbey, mate. So if you saw that in a TV documentary, that would be an arresting story to hear first person. But for me, the bloke that wrote the Occult Battle of Britain, to be hearing that in Glastonbury Abbey, in that context with this sort of anthroposophical something or another going on, was pretty damn intense. And I did have that sense that even though, there's something very interesting going on between human vehicles, there was something on a higher level of the game that was definitely trying to play itself out in the connections that were being made and what I was making of them. Now, it'd be very easy if I was just run solely by my intellect, my mind with a small m, to think, well, okay, I've got to make something happen that mashes up Steiner and the unfortunate in the Abbey now and contrive it. I've got enough information in my head to make some shit up and make something fairly interesting happen anyway. But I also thought, no, you wait for the moment of true inspiration and it will come, and I will tell you all about that. But now it's 2021 and I go into Glastonbury Abbey on the morning of July the 8th. About 10:30 in the morning. Nobody else is there's a few people in there. Everybody that works there is there. There's a few people milling about. I just go straight up the centre aisle of the church and I can immediately see there's some piles of earth where the high altar is. And what the fuck, someone's dug a flipping great hole in the high altar. And it's me, I'm the one that sings out the alarm bell on that. Nobody else has spotted it. The Abbey's been open for half an hour. Everybody that works in there is there. There are people milling about, but it's me that spots this thing, that gets called it off. It's graphic stories in papers and whatnot. I later discovered, I was not fully conscious of it at the time, July the 8th is the date of the death of King Edgar, of whom we'll hear plenty more due to his connection with Glastonbury Abbey. I have no idea to this day what happened there. I don't think necessarily that whoever did it knew anything about King Edgar, whatever. It just continued to say, you got some interesting stuff going on in the pod. As we get near to the Jubilee, in which I became quite strongly involved, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in 2022, as we come to the end of 2021, I started my brain went into overdrive and I came back to this map that Mark Hutchinson had given me. And I don't know, you probably can't see that much detail from where you can see. But the thing is about that map, you can see where a whole bunch of abbots were interred in Glastonbury Abbey. There's 14 abbots interred in Glastonbury Abbey. And when it comes to All Saints, the Virgin Mary is the greatest saint of all. The whole monastery is dedicated to her. You've got the church dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul. You've got disputed relics of Dunstan there. You've got to have saint stuff going on. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go round on an extensive walkabout and stop where every single one of these abbots were interred and at least say their name out loud. When the hell has anybody ever done that? Possibly never. And some of these guys are maybe not that interesting. They did their building work, they did this, they did that. Some of the rest of them are really interesting, and you can weave in some right weird old stuff as a beano in Glastonbury Abbey. So I gathered together, I put it out on Facebook, and I got probably the most diverse and interesting group of people that I've ever gathered together for any event that I've ever done. There's a few of you that are in this room now that are part of that. I had a mixture of, there's a right old smattering of PhDs in there, there's visionaries, people that drop out and see angels and monks walking out of walls and all this sort of caper. And, I was in there for 2.5 hours. This is just one little example up at the North Transept. On the left, you can see some artwork, reconstruction of the Bligh period. There's a few little graves on the stones on the floor there. And I'm standing there, giving them all the yuck, I went for that, and that set me up for things. Comes back about Christmas Eve. I'm reading Company of Avalon, yet again, and I end up in this kind of Google wormhole. There was like reference to Sherburn in there. I don't even know how I ended up with this. But when I discovered the story of Edgar the Martyr, I was absolutely staggered that I didn't already know it. He had been one of two sons of Edgar the Peaceable, who was crowned by Dunstan, who was buried in Glastonbury Abbey, and at the age of, I think, 15, 16, the mother of his half-brother is arriving for the throne, the guy that becomes Ethelred, known to history as the Unready, arranges to have him killed down at Court Castle, and it's a brutal thing. He's stabbed in the back, and he's just slain, his body's just dumped in this cottage, and then a whole bunch of stories arise, of which, who knows what you can make of it. But it's said that there was a blind woman in this cottage, and she somehow touched his body and was immediately healed and restored her sight. And a huge great cult around him comes up almost instantly. He ends up in Shaftesbury for the duration of the Middle Ages. And then, fast forward after dissolution in 1931, some bones are found that are generally accepted to be his, although I will say there's a little bit of dispute about that, how boy support don't believe it. But there's dispute also about what's going to happen to him. The guy, somehow or another, the ownership, etc., the guy who's found them, the land that it was on, he says that wherever they go, it's got to be acknowledged as a saint, and it's got to be set up in some sort of chapel. So his bones end up in the vault of a Midland bank in Woking for a matter of decades. And then this weird-ass Russian Orthodox sect, they're actually called the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, that's their full title. They make a bid for him and they get it, and they set up this flipping great enormous chapel Abbey shrine to him at a place called Brookwood in Surrey. It's stuffed to the flipping ceiling of icons, and they do a full number on him, all full Orthodox stuff on him. And this image is an icon that I bought from them, and I thought, his feast day, March 18th, I'm just going to take this thing in the Abbey and give him a yard. Why the hell not, So I did, and I don't know if you can see, all I've done is I've stuck this little icon on the bench in the Edgar chapel, and I've told this story. Look at that sweet photo about that Sunday, and it's just hit that flipping icon. That's what you want, isn't it? And I was aware of the fact that on the same occasion, these monks were doing their number in Surrey. Someone I knew was able to go along and tell them that I was doing this thing. Started this, mate. Wow. I mean, the fact that this even exists is a joy to me. And it's a typical Orthodox scenario, okay, there's like 2 people in the congregation and like way more people that are actually celebrants. It goes flipping hours, man. It's enough to bore the piss out of you. But as we used to find in Glastonbury, when a guy, some of you might remember, called Father John, he used to do his numbers. He used to do these really extensive, weird-ass. He was the Celtic Orthodox Church, and he would go in the Abbey and he'd be stamping his foot down to suppress Satan, and talking about the pagans and all this sort of stuff. And his congregation was all flipping pagans and weirdos. And they were the people that saw the angels coming down at the right point in the service. They were the people that saw the monks walking out the walls. The whole flipping juice of everything this knackered old geezer was doing was coming from all us weirdos. And I love all that stuff. So here's Dunstan, and I'm not repeating anything that I said last year. I talked a lot about the Jubilee. I'm jumping ahead to the next year where the Queen's dead, and we know that Charles is going to have a coronation in May, and it's going to be a big number, and the committee that was the Jubilee mutates into the Arts, Culture, Events Committee. Now, I've shown this photo because I knew I was doing that in this room, so that photo's taken at the back of this room. It's the very first meeting in January last year, and I immediately said, can we have a very, very basic event in the Edgar Chapel where King Edgar was buried that just sort of minds out Edgar being crowned by Dunstan. Just like 3 people, Edgar, Dunstan, narrator, and we're going to have a whole bunch of civic dignitaries and so on in there on that day. And I'm glad to say that they gave us the young. Now this is the actual event itself, but I'll kind of break it down. There is a video of it on my YouTube channel. I didn't think it was appropriate for today, and I've got so much more else to talk about. But one way or another, this happened, and we roped in the usual crew. This is everybody dragging in, all the druids and whatever. We've got the mayor, we've got the Lord Lieutenant of Somerset, who's the highest level representative of the royal family in the area. Behind this row, there's another row of vice sheriffs and a whole bunch of people. They flipping love us here. If we invite them along, they will turn up for it. So that was all going on. And it's like I'm the director. I've got to set all of this up, along with Zoe here. We get the whole thing going. There's a whole bunch of emails going back and forth. This is my like stage directions, and in the end, absolute perfection comes in with the crew that we managed to get together. In the cassette there is Tim Hopkins and Bob. Now Tim. So these guys know Tim pretty well. Tim is a biographer of Frederick Bligh. He's also a mainstay of the Antiquarian Society. He's done some great work or papers on the cult of Virgin Mary and also Edgar at Glastonbury Abbey. And the guy that's the king is Joel Bunting, who's a National Trust ranger. He's a guy who looks after Glastonbury Tor. If any of you have recently been up on the field nearby and seen that big circle of trees around that has recently been planted in the last couple of years, he's the guy that set all that up. And, well, Bill Witch as Dunstan, for heaven's sake, right? Bill's a legend. Bill's a Glastonbury legend. He's a member of the Antiquarian Society, Church Warden at St John's, big-time theatrical background, produced a revival of Rutland Bowden's choral drama, Bethlehem, in St John's Church back in 2005. And up in Wales, they've got this whole business of the dragon at this place called Dinda, and the fact that every 50 years or so they do a mystery play to reenact how Bishop Jocelyn had killed his dragon. It's a right over weird stuff. The last time this happened in 2001, it was Bill that wrote the play that was performed there. He's done mystery plays in the Abbey and so on and so forth. It's absolutely corking that we managed to get him on board. Now, not only that, when it came to what Tim and Bill had in the dressing up box, you know, we were worried about how we were going to get someone to look like some Dunstan and not just be mediocre. Bill knows it, and there's the money shot. You know, that's basically the simplistic thing. Now, the whole video, Tim Hopkins and Ball, I just said to him, well, look, Tim, say whatever you want, just, you know, a few little bullet points. He knocks the ball out of the park. It's flipping astonishing performance that he's put in. Absolute big yos to him. On the left is an image from the 1922 Buxton pageant. There's a banner at the front with a Grail chalice on it. Now, Celia Thomas of the Fellowship of Isis in Glastonbury took a shine to that banner and made her own version of it, and it featured in a Fellowship of Isis event in this town earlier that year. And I said to her, how do you fancy bringing it along and putting it up as it were stage right, so that we kind of have a signifier that we are in the spirit of Alice Buckton and a pageant of 1922. So she did, but here you see, there's Bill, and Bill's wife Kay. Bill's wife Kay, her mother came to town in the 1920s and was part of Alice Buckton's ongoing repertory company. She was part of a whole bunch of stuff that they did, and they've actually got costumes in their flipping attic that date from the 1920s and stuff that Alice Buckton did. So the continuity there is flipping bonkers. It was so heartening, and it was just like, yeah, okay, you're on the right. This is Avalon the odds, the maximum. You know, keep it going. Last year, Michaelmas, the film that was made of all our Jubilee activities, of which I showed my Joseph Arimathea speech on this same slot last year. The film of the whole thing, which we called Avalon of the Heart, was ready to be shown, and I was aware of the fact, you know, we talked about it at one of the committee meetings in this room. I said, well look, Michaelmas is a Friday and it's a full moon. Is the town all free? Yes it is. So we screened this thing for the first time, but I thought to myself, you know, that's going to be a big day anyway, because I'm a talking head through quite a bit of that. It's going to be a big day anyway, but I'm going to do more. I'm going to do an event in Glastonbury Abbey, and I'm going to do a Steiner flavoured Michaelmas. And this is where finally the inspirations that set off 3 years earlier start to come in. So I'm using some artwork from a guy called Harold Rosenkrantz, Danish anthroposophically inspired artist. This is like stuff that I posted on Facebook at the time. Look how perfect that weather was for Michaelmas. You can't say it any better than that, can you? Where it really kicked in for me was the idea that I had another one of these nobody's ever done anything like this before type things. Steiner went to Tintagel in 1924. He had an awful lot of weird stuff to say about it that I can't take as being history, but I can take as being very spiritually inspiring. He is another one who had so much to say about Arthur, about the Grail, about Joseph Arimathea, about the Arthurian mysteries. His stuff is now digitised, which maybe some of his followers might consider a bit Arianic, but it's pretty useful for us lot now. As far as I can tell, and I've gone back to this repeatedly, there's not a single flipping mention of Glastonbury anywhere in his work, which just seems really flipping weird. So I thought to myself, okay, he has had a lot to say about Arthur and Tintagel. Let's mash up where Arthur was born in Tintagel with where he's supposed to have been finding later rest. Again, I'm talking about a mythic overlay here. I'm not arguing about what those bones were that ended up in that tomb. But there's an awful lot of stuff in the psychosphere that is kind of vibrating with it. So I thought it'd be really interesting, you know. So I read out at the point of Arthur's tomb a whole bunch of stuff that Steiner had said about Tintagel and about Arthur in 1924. He's got this thing, he calls it the Arthurian Mysteries. It's an initiatory current of esoteric knowledge that serves as a conduit for astrological gnosis from the days of Egypt to Babylon into the Christian era, with Arthur as a sun king, particularly attuned to the Michael force. So what Steiner says is there's a mystery cult at Tintagel likened to Lucis as far back as 1000 BC. And he believed also, this is another one of his weird ass ideas, that before Christ incarnated, there were people that were able to tune into him in advance, often via Archangel Michael. So this is what occurred with this mystery cult at Tintagel. Now, as I say, the history of this is all over the flipping show. I don't even remotely believe any of that, but there is something weirdly potent about it that I was prepared to run with. And I thought, let's just do this. Now, Eleanor Merry was an anthroposophically inclined artist. It was her. She was the one that arranged the trip to Tintagel in 1924. Two carloads of people. She was the one that set it in motion. And she's the author of a pretty well-known book, The Flaming Door, which is probably known to a number of you in here. And it's another one of these books that it's just, oh dear, you know, the Druid stuff that comes from Ireland, the Gangwig, a lot of the history of Arthur, etc. It's all over the flipping show, but there's a poetry to it, there's a potency to it, and it's a book that I really like and that I come back to. And in common with the Unfortunate, she states Rudolf Steiner's idea that Arthur's not just one distinct individual, but he's the name of a representative order devoted to the war against evil. That's a direct quote from The Unfortunate. Steiner, Merry says the same thing. Now she talks about Glastonbury and she says that there's a Celtic mystery school current, you know, all part of this Arthurian mysteries thing, that basically is taken out of commission when the bones come out in 1191, but the whole thing's dead as a doornail after that. But I don't take that as being the case, obviously. But what she does say, which she has a lot to say about in this book, and why I kind of brought it out at this point, is what Steiner has to say about Chartres Cathedral and the school of Chartres, and that this is a sort of a mystery school as well. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on relating to the Dominican order, you know, scholasticism, Aristotelianism, and there's a whole thing that goes on through the Middle Ages where people of one school of thought are coming down from the supernal realms into incarnation, whereas another bunch of people, the teachers of the school of Chartres, are going back up, and they're having a sort of chinwag up in the supernal realms, and they're setting up a whole complicated thing of how certain things become, you know, more notable and stuff fades from view and comes back in again. And there's a general balance that occurs that just goes on and on for hundreds of ages. And these people reincarnate, you know, it's a big thing, as many of you would know, Steiner and his reincarnational identities. And these characters are around in the early days of Anthroposophy, waiting for 1879. You know, when all this kicks in, they come back through and they're involved in the early days of Anthroposophy. So that's absolutely fascinating. Oh, we lost the picture. This is one of the problems I have in here. It's like if I haven't got that laptop in that exact spot, the HDMI cable and we lose the picture. We're going to have a picture of, I hope, the cloisters and one of Lightborn's company of Avalon crew. And while I wait for that image to appear, I am nonetheless going to read out. We're getting there, looks like something's happened there. Next one. Yeah, okay, cool. This is from the company of Avalon, which is 1924, and by this stage, It's no longer, Bond's getting other people coming in, giving him scripts and so on. It's all John Barley. The schools of philosophic thought which once influenced Earth's greatest thinkers still, although they've passed away from us as physical units here, have swayed over their spirits of their votaries in the heavens. They continue to work in accordance with their respective ideals, influencing those on Earth whose minds may be sufficiently attuned to their ideals to feel their power. So it is, we are told, with the company of Avalon, a group of souls who are impregnated with the devotional ideal, which is translated into architectural symbol by the Benedictine brethren of old time. These, the elect of Avalon, combine as a united spiritual force in an effort which is really one of response to those of us who, of our own volition, have attuned ourselves to their vibrations. And she talks about a guy called John of Salisbury. He was part of the Chartres setup, and he was a close friend of Thomas Becket. He was known to Henry II. There is a kind of crossover between what's going on over there and what's going on over here. So you've got stuff that Steiner's coming up with in the 20s, you've got Bligh Bond in 1924, and you've got Falconelli in 1926. It's like this spirit of Gothic cathedrals is stirring. So I go downstairs, and this is where I really kind of get my sense of what I'm doing going. One way or another, regardless of stories of Joseph Arimathea or any of the other mythology, there's no question that we have a very early dedication to the Virgin Mary with the old church in Glastonbury Abbey. It's hundreds of years in advance of the whole Gothic cathedral outpouring. Now, keeping the Chartres thing going, there is this mystical legend, if you like, and the sources are during the Middle Ages, okay, that Chartres had been a Druid centre, that, there's this quaint story that in 50 BC, somehow the Druids had heard of a prophecy in Isaiah in the Old Testament about a virgin that would bear a divine child, and all right, it's a medieval kind of gloss, but they sent a delegation to Jerusalem to inquire about whether this baby's been born or not. And one way or another, somebody in Chartres, a prince of Chartres, so the story goes, gets this image together on which is carved simply this title, the Virgin who will bear a child, and it is revered. It is revered. Now what's intriguing is the fact that, this is something that you've got a source of, and in some of the stories that we're hearing, what Sally told us yesterday, the Celtic saints, the Irish saints, there are Druids in these stories, they're a part of it. Whereas over here, our Joseph Arimathea stories, there is no linking up with the Druids for hundreds of years after the dissolution. The idea that, Joseph has already got it on with the Druids, and when he finally comes here, they recognise the new dispensation, etc. That's no more than 150 years old, and yet it's as if there's an archetype, there's some kind of thing that somehow requires these stories to have certain coordinates for them to achieve their fullest form, if you like. But anyway, there's a fire in Glastonbury, as we know, in 1184. It's kind of interesting that there's one in 1194 at Chartres that pretty much trashes the place. Our statue of the Virgin Mary in there survives the fire, and Chartres has got a cloth that was worn by Mary when she gave birth to Jesus, and this survived it. And we've got, of course, this remarkable, we've got a threefold set of Marys in Chartres. This is under the earth, so this conforms to this druidic sort of mythology that, if you like, the stories of this under the earth. And there's also the next one of that, and then the next one after that. So this is Our Lady of the Pillar. Now I'll put these two pictures here because this demonstrates the controversy over the issue of the black and white statues. And over the years, church authorities have said, well, don't just be black and white, by candlelight. The sort of candles and so on, they're not really black. People say, oh, come on now. In this case, it's true. They've cleaned her up, and there she is. And it's been ongoing contention about whether they should have done that, whether something terrible has been done, whether it was the right thing to be done. But anyway, that's another thing altogether. That's ground level, if you like. And here's this window generally the Blue Madonna, Queen of Heaven. This is actually very early. This is like sort of, 12th century. So we've got a threefold configuration there: underworld, and the middle world and heaven. And we've got three Marys also. We've got two Marys in Glastonbury. We've got the one, the statue that has survived the fire and remains displayed through the Middle Ages in the Mary Chapel. And after a miraculous manifestation where this statue started clapping in full view of a whole bunch of people, a massive further statue is built and put around the high altar. And it's possible that this statue, something of the visual aspects of this are recorded in the seal of the late medieval abbot, which in turn inspires the statue in the Catholic Church. So one way or another is to say, because we don't know about our stained glass windows, it's an absolute odds on certainty that we had a stained glass window showing the Virgin Mary in Glastonbury. Of course we flipping did, So there's three Marys there, and this sort of morphs with the three Marys at Chartres, and just enabled me to sort of riff with it. And this story again, Steiner takes this thing that the Druids, like Arthur and his knights at Tintagel, were able to commune with the Christ current before the incarnation. Now, although Archangel Michael is the centre of gravity of Anthroposophy, there's another factor of tremendous importance in his work. It's not the Christ that we lack, the knowledge of Christ, the Isis of Christ, the Sophia of Christ is what fails us. The Sophia, the wisdom included in the titles of Blavatsky and Steiner's movements, have been contemplated as distinctively enforced by Christian mystics. With Steiner, this is a vital aspect of the understanding of his mission. It's very important to understand that Anthroposophia is believed by Steiner to actually be a spiritual being, who inhabit a realm very similar to what would have been understood by the ancient Gnostics. Anthroposophia descended to Earth from the cosmos, and this began in 1902, when the German section of the Theosophical Society was founded, with which Steiner was closely involved. Now, after Steiner's death, Anthroposophia as a being was neglected by the movement, but in the last, 30 years or so, this has started to change. So I wrote a lot about the Shekhinah in my Abbots book, and I riffed a lot further in my Bligh book. So this is where I reframe things. If John Michel's to be believed, the architectural form of Glastonbury Abbey conforms to geometry in the New Jerusalem, and different Kabbalistic realms deal with varying levels of form. Geometry is clearly important as the formless divine emanates in the descending forms. What's experienced as a feminine energy can also be expressed through geometry of another. Jerusalem of Bligh's prophetic book is both a city and a woman. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So my wild reverie is to contemplate Our Lady of Glastonbury as revered in the great medieval abbey as a form of the Sophianic Shekhinah, the divine presence in which the ancient goddesses of the old cultures of the Middle East, Asherah, Astarte, Ishtar, cohered as the bride of God in Solomon's temple. Throughout medieval Europe, the Virgin Mary was the form in which the old goddesses survived and the Sophianic wisdom remained. Scholars like Margaret Barker will affirm this. This was the Grail spirit that helped inspire the aura of sanctity around the place. The ruination of Glastonbury Abbey that occurred during the dissolution of the monasteries can be felt as analogous to the destruction of Solomon's temple when the Shekhinah departed, and prayers for the restoration can be said ever since. Rare degrees connect with us still. The Holy Spirit Shekhinah feminine, the bride Jerusalem departed, and the poignant yearning for the rebuilding has been partly inspired by the pain of that loss. Now, the Abbey isn't getting rebuilt, but that divine feminine has notably configured anew immediately adjacent to it. And I say this in my Bligh book. We now have in Glastonbury what I consider to be a profound psychogeographical zone that functions as a kind of Jungian waking dream, whereby some potent alchemy is being worked with archetypes of the divine feminine. It's all happening along a stretch of a few hundred metres in Magdalen Street, just out there, and that name itself is enough to set up a chain of associations. We've got the Magdalene Chapel itself, which is strictly speaking the Margaret Chapel. It's part of the Magdalene Almhouses, but it is essentially become the Magdalene Chapel. I was able to find this picture of Copper Beach when it was a hotel where Mr. and Mrs. Yule stayed in 1939. It was great to get a chance to tell that story to Vivian Crowley on Friday night. the inside of the Catholic Church. It's interesting, Jung stayed there in April 1939, work began on it in March 1939, as part of the commemoration of the 400th anniversary of White's martyrdom. The foundation stone was laid in 1940. For those of you that have stayed in the Covenstead or Magdalene House, it was all, of course, one building, the St Louis Convent. And here's the nuns in front of the Catholic Church, and there they are outside the entrance. And just a little bit further on from that is Goddess House. That is a very intense couple of 100 metres just outside the ruins of the Abbey for it all to be happening with. So that night on the 29th, downstairs in the town hall, I didn't talk about all this again, but I did show the banner that Talia Brown had created, based on my Bligh cover, which is a mashup of Our Lady Glastonbury and the Dolores Blanc. Now, when you leave this room, if you look through this little window just immediately to my right there, you will see, you know, this banner is property of the council. It was funded by the council. It's hanging up. I showed a few of you that at the beginning of it all. So the three spheres within a circle representing religion, art and science encompassed by the circle of culture, or alternatively the past, present, future achievements of humanity, guarded within the circle of eternity. I found this very interesting and very easy to link in with what I've been riffing on earlier on the same day about Anthroposophical. And back to Falconelli. You know, Falconelli's alchemical interpretation stated that the first substance, the primal material of which the universe was created, the very essence of things is one and the same with matter. The cathedrals dedicated to the Virgin are alchemical temples demonstrating God's creation of life, the transformations of the original substance. For in the Ave Regina, the Virgin is properly called root, salve radix, to show that she is the principle and beginning of all things. Hail root by which the light has shone on the world. So I've reframed this for you now then. The thought that made the great church of Glastonbury was not bounded by ye mind, and that thought must live and prevail. Oh man, I've got only 5 minutes to go, and I've got a few things to tell you. Right, let's see how far I get with this. One of the things that was going on all the way through the year, spring equinox, I went up on the tour and I walked by the Unfortunate's house and saw this swastika graffiti on the National Trust display board immediately adjacent to her old property, which struck me as a, you know, I don't believe some Nazi cultist knew that that was the Unfortunate's house, put it there, but, you know, I called it a waking dream, the proximity of it. If you dreamt it, you woke up from it, you think, shit man, this is important. So our boy Joel Bunting, the guy who plays King Edgar, the National Trust Ranger, he's the guy that actually claims that off. So when he portrays King Edgar, you know, it's very satisfying to me that he's the guy that has cleaned the swastika off. Within a matter of a couple of days after my Michaelmas, none of you will know this, this comes out. This article on the Black Sun by a local man, Hugh the Provost. The Knights Templars venerated the Black Madonna and they refer to her as the Black Sun. Her name is Sophianic goddess of divine wisdom, and she equates with Isis, the Egyptian goddess of wisdom, who also is black. In 1919, a group of occultists led by Cal Hosofer and Deirdre Eckhart formed an occult group called the Thought Society, whose purpose was to restore the soul of Germany. The Nazi Party was its political wing, but the highest aspects of the Vril Society and the Order of the Black Sun. They sought to harness the power of the Black Sun and change Germany and the world. So when I first saw this, I woke up at 5 o'clock the next morning sweating, and I had to just write this flipping tape down. Because all this is second generation Nazi cultism, which comes from a guy called William Landy, who hung around in Vienna in the 1950s, and the image that was displayed with that was that the Black Sun was created by a former SS officer. There was a whole attempt here, and the author of it is imbecilically unaware of this. What's happening is an attempt to make the Nazis cool, you know, to make them adepts, to make them, you know, purveyors of real, authentic, arcane knowledge. And part of that procedure involves an attempt to retrospectively rewrite our esoteric history. So that, for example, the alchemical sun, Niger, the Black Sun, which has always been, you know, in our tradition, but so this is exactly what these Nazis are talking about and was always understood to be that, rather than giving the concept a new spin. As I said in my response, The suggestion in this article that the Knights Templar thought of the Black Madonna Sophia, who is also Isis' black sun, maybe would have kicked my guts up. And it's very, very strange. It's like, what happens when I've done this whole thing in the Abbey, and this has come out days later. I didn't see it for a couple of weeks, but it was literally days after I did that whole thing down in the Abbey that came out. Oh, galloping now, very quickly. And then, of course, it gets even worse when Glastonbury's leading Holocaust denier and Hitler worshipper gets an advert in the next edition of Black Sun. I want to thank someone in this room for providing me with the motherload of screenshots of her atrocities. I went on the warpath again, and the end result of that was that the person in question started approaching me in the street, started having Holocaust denial rants at me that I couldn't get a word in edgeways, and started. Now, I was in a really difficult situation because I'm like a 6-foot bloke from Essex who's capable of getting very shouty if he wants to, but I can't shout a load of abuse at a woman repeatedly in the street all the time, every time I see it. If I do that, I'm not going to be the one that comes out winning then.
Yeah.
So what's happened? Sorry? What's happened now is that she's empowered and emboldened by my takedown to get even worse, and like her stuff is just full on Holocaust denial, yay Hitler, all the fucking time. And she approaches me in the street, and we almost, I mean, this is terrifying, we almost exchange a bit of banter, you know, and that's just absolutely fucking wretched. But we're going to end with something amazing. I'm going to have to tell this story. Christmas Eve, just gone. I'm in Glastonbury Abbey thinking about my family home, thinking about my late parents, thinking about the fact that I had 51 Christmas Eves in there, 49 Christmas days. I'm getting very nostalgic about it. I go out thinking I'm going to walk up the high street, go to St John's and see their Christmas tree fair. And then I see the Nazi walking ahead of me down the road. And I think if she goes up the high street, I might end up she might approach me, and I'm not having that flipping pestilence getting in my face on Christmas Eve. So fucking, I'm going home. So I went in the newsagent just over the road, which was supposedly, you know, premier newsagent. I thought, I'll get a Magnum ice cream and I'm going home. And I'm in there, and this guy says, "Uncle," I thought, "Who's this?" And I recognise him. He's a Facebook friend. He's from Benfleet, where I lived for all that time. He's from Benfleet. We start talking. He reckons that he had actually been at one of my events in the Abbey. I don't remember him talking to me. He must have been the all saying stuff. It turns out he went to the same junior school as me. About a couple of minutes later, nearly, went to the same secondary school as me. He went to the same sixth form college as me. Now, here's the thing. He was just gathering his supplies together, getting a drink. He was going to get in his car. He was going to drive right back to Benfleet there and then, see his 85-year-old mother, as I had done, you know, in the decade after my dad had died. And when I talked to her, I said, "Where does she live then?" And she lived in a road that was exactly parallel to the road that my parents lived in. So I went home and I just thought the exquisite flipping artistry of that. What a comprehensive package. So, you know, that I couldn't separate Glastonbury Abbey from this. So I leave you with that. I leave you, you know, I commend this approach and just how wide next, and I'm sure this presentation will be mighty fun. It's great to see you all. I'll probably be about afterwards. I might be flying my way over to the GMP or something, but I'm happy to sort of chat and generally do that with you all basically. Feedback you got from that little number.